Everyone, my name is Raf and I'm the electrical rep from Lausanne Engineering Society, and I'll be your host for the event today. Question will be, I think Professor Pingwang already answered hers, but what upper year courses do you guys teach and what can the students expect to learn from those courses?
Okay, so as I just mentioned, so I teach computer communication networks in the third year, for the third year students, and another two courses, mobile communications for the fourth year, and digital signal processing for the first year students. So all the courses are electrical engineering major courses. So if you are interested in this electrical engineering, especially in communication area, so these are courses, some fundamental courses you may want to take. So it's very beneficial for you to learn some essential knowledge about these communications, mobile communications, communication networks. So you will learn, the basic and the key technology and of those different layer at physical layer, data link layer, network layer, how we how those communication networks functions at different layers. So those fundamental techniques will be introduced in those courses. So I highly recommend you to take those courses if you are interested in this electrical engineering, especially in these communications in this area. So it will be beneficial for your future, maybe job hunting, or if you look for jobs related to this like communication related companies, it will be very useful.
All right. So I've taught a few different upper level courses. So the main course I teach is 3610, which is semiconductor physics and devices. So that really goes a little more deeply into how semiconductor devices work. So basically diodes, transistors. So if you want to work for a company that makes, like I said, these displays, whether it's Apple or, CPUs, GPUs, AMD, those kind of companies, knowing how transistors work and what's the physics behind it, how does a semiconductor behave, is very important. I've taught a couple other upper division classes, 3612, which is sensors and measurement, which is a useful topic, but I haven't taught in a couple of years. 4614, which is electro-optics, which basically takes 3610, which is sort of the electronics of semiconductors, and now looks at how do semiconductors interact with light. So if you want to know how to make an LED or how to make a laser, for example, then that's the kind of course for you. And actually there's a new course which I've proposed, which I've created, and hopefully will be taught the first time next year. That is 4610. So that is, not sure what the exact titles, but basically microfabrication. So in 3610, I teach what a transistor should look like and how it should operate. But then if you want to know how to make it, so the really advanced techniques they use in the industry in clean rooms to make silicon chips, that course will cover that. Yeah, and so those courses are really if you want to go into the semiconductor industry. Also teach, as Ashia mentioned, I taught some lower division courses. I taught Java in the first year. I've taught circuits class as well. So if you don't go into electrical engineering, you might see me in physics 3050, which is basic circuits and some basics of semiconductor physics as well.
I'm excited for 4610 next year.
We'll be taking an audience question now. So Demetrius, I'll just ask if you can unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, I just have two quick questions. The first one is, at what point are we going to see a difference between like electrical engineering and computer engineering courses?
That's a very good question. And I don't know, Ping, if you know the answer. There's a bunch of overlap, right? And there's also a bunch of electives you can take. Maybe Hashir might be the better person, or someone who's made this flowchart might be the better person to answer this.
I'll answer your question just because these professors are more dealt with the teaching side of things. And if you came to our first ECS panel, that was more so about Professor Sebastian Nagorowski and Professor Jackie Lang. So they know more of the administrative stuff. So basically, when you see the division of electrical and computer is actually in third year. Till second year, we mostly take the same exact courses. In second year, it's a division between software and electrical and computer because there's only, I think, 2 courses that we take differently than them. So software takes 2311, which is a software project course, and they take data structures, which is 2011. But instead of that, we take 3451, which is signals and systems, and we take 2210, which is electronic circuits and devices. So that's the only division between software and electrical and computer together, and then electrical and computer divides into separate. It basically people chooses. So people chooses to go into the electronics or more embedded system side of the computer engineering, or they want to go to the more software side of things. And they usually choose that around third year with their technical electives and their fourth year electives, if that answers your questions.
It does. Thank you very much. And can I ask my second question?
Yeah, sure.
It's just so I know because I'm first year student, so like first year, then what if I looked second year as well. They're both like our courses are kind of like given to us. So is there any point in our, I guess, program where we're actually able to like choose like an outside course that's like not really like related to engineering or Lassonde?
Yeah.
Yeah, usually those will be in like third year for each of software, computer, and electrical. You'll have elective classes in other fields, but in second year, you don't have much choice between all 3. You will mostly just have a set assigned list of courses that you have to take. Third and fourth year, though, you will have a lot of choice to go outside the Lassonde faculty.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, I guess we can take our next submitted question. So I'll pick the next question. We talked earlier about 1021 and how all the first year students would be taking it. So what would be like your advice to students doing this class right now? And I guess this could be directed more at Gerd because he taught it last year. But what would be like your advice to kind of follow in this class? Because if you're doing a major in this department, you're probably going to want to do very well in that class, or at least learn a lot from that class so you can apply it later, right?
Yeah. So, well, you have to see what the how the professor teaches it this year, right? Might be slightly different from how I taught it last year, and they might have some advice as well, right? But I guess the bottom line is with programming, it's good to practice it, right? That's the you need to make sure you follow the lectures and you know all the concepts that were taught, right? That's key. That's one key. But then the other key is you need to be able to apply it, right? We have the labs, and then a fairly big chunk of the grade is also the lab tests, right? And that tests whether you can write the code. So make sure that you do all the labs, that you do them diligently, and really then there's these sort of first year programming classes, it's always a little challenging because some of you come in and you've done some coding in high school, whether it's part of your curriculum or maybe you've just done it, taught it yourself or something like that, right? So some people come in and they already know everything that's taught in these classes, or they think they do. Maybe they don't know everything, but they know a decent amount, right? And then some people come in and they've never done any coding, right? And that's perfectly fine, right? That's what these courses are there for, to bring everyone up to a certain level. So that makes it a little challenging, and that's why sometimes, for example, the lab exercises are geared to bring everyone to a decent level where everyone can do some coding, but then that might be too hard for some people and too easy for others, right? So you need to know where you fall in there, and really don't just take what's given to you, but also experiment further, right? So let's say there is an exercise and you need to write some code, and sometimes you just have to add certain lines to a code that already exists. Then try to understand the rest of the code, right? Try to understand if you change something, or think about, well, now I have to do this task and I've completed it. What if I want to do something else? Can I also do this? And just experiment with it. Talk to your TAs if you have questions, talk to the instructor. But there are also many, many resources out there on Java, right? On the internet, where you can then find out and then implement it and see, does it work? And with programming, often, the nice thing about programming is, it's not like a lab science where, you need to go in and like chemistry, you need to mix something, and if you mess up, the building explodes, right? Like here, you can actually go in and try something out. If it doesn't work, you learn from that and you improve based on that. So that's my advice. Basically, try to learn as much as you can and try to practice. That's the main advice.
Oh, okay, that was very, very good, detailed, thoughtful answer. I guess I'll have Saraf ask their next submitted question.
Sorry. Would you be able to state some common mistakes that you guys made or you guys have seen other people make during your undergraduate degree that our students can avoid?
You're muted.
Wait, did you guys hear me? Okay, never mind. It is, I unmuted myself, but I think it didn't go through. So, would you have any common mistakes, or you remember any common mistakes you guys made or your peers made during your undergraduate degree that our students can avoid?
So you mean the common mistake we did for our undergraduate degree? So is this your question? Okay, so common mistake. It's quite a long time ago. I have to think about. Girl, maybe you can.
Anything you would do differently? Anything that when you did your first year that you thought that like you didn't know until you reached at a later point at your degree and you thought, oh, I could have done that differently?
Okay, I can share something about my undergrad study. Especially for the first year, actually, I experienced, quite a lot of pressure at that time because, the university life is quite different from the, high school life I experienced before. And the students, my older classmates around me, they are quite, all very excellent students. So it's and there's in terms of study, it's also it's very there's many more courses than the high school. So to me, I experienced a lot of pressure at first year because of new environment, because of some pressure from from the study, from my classmates and so on. So I remember clearly. Yes, I quite suffer a lot in the first year, but fortunately, I got some advice from my parents, and also, I thought a lot about my university studies. It's not just about study itself. It's when I go to university, I want to open my mind, not just spend all the time for study. So I really, I think the university changed me a lot. So I make a quite balanced life. I don't just focus on study itself. I open my eyes also to other activities, other opportunities. So this helped me to reduce my stress because I'm not just focused on study itself. Well, the interesting is that after I make a balanced life, I don't just focus, put too much pressure on myself on the study. My study itself improved a lot. It just simply spend less time, but I really improve a lot in terms of the GPA. So this is very interesting. If you put too much pressure on yourself, maybe you cannot get many the good performance as you expect. So try to. I know this is also a very challenging time here, like first year students. You face this COVID-19 pandemic. It's also another kind of pressure to all the students. The environment is also different. But I just want to give you some advice. No matter what you you face, you encounter, just think in a positive way to try to reduce your pressure as much as you can and think about things positively. And eventually you will find that the university will bring you a lot of new things, and you will become more confident. I think after you have overcome your pressure and overcome something that you feel challenged before. If you manage to overcome those kind of things, yeah, this is some experience I have had in my university life. Okay. Hope it helps.
Cool.
Okay.
It'll be hard to top that story for Professor Grau, but I think we can see if he gives it a shot.
Well, I mean, I agree with Ping that this is, being in university is quite a unique time. It's quite a great, it's one of the best times in your life, right? You have a lot more freedom than you had at high school, right? In terms of what you want to do, right? What you want to do in terms of academic, but also outside that, right? So you should take advantage of that. You can develop new interests. You can meet a lot of new people. Again, this year, everything's different this year, right? And we just have to, try to make do with this year and stay positive and do events like this, right? But yeah, in general, university is not just about academics, right? It's also about, this is a phase for you to grow up, right? After you leave high school, and now you're a little more independent, and then you really find what you want to do after you graduate, right? There are a lot of different things you can do, and not just studying is important. It actually, as Ping said, it can actually help your GPA if you don't own the stress, right? Because then at some point you can't think about it anymore. So that's important, and it's also because university has a lot more opportunities than high school, right? To meet people, to develop new interests and so on. So I agree with all of that, but I also just want to say the counterpoint, I guess, and that is university gives you a lot of freedom, and a big part of university is learning how to deal with that, right? So one reason why people hire university grads is it's not just because of the knowledge that you got, right? Yes, you get a lot of knowledge in the class, a lot of technical knowledge, that's all very important, but it's also, you've shown that you can work for yourself, right? You can learn a lot of things, and you can do well in an environment like this where, here, in North America, there's a lot of homework, a lot of midterms that sort of force you to work every week. But even here, you have a lot of freedom. You can, try to cram the night before the final exam. And so my advice would be not to do that, because that's how you end up with a lot of stress in the last few weeks of the semester. It's much less stressful, actually, if you work continuously throughout the semester, go to the lectures, do the homework, read through the lecture notes after the lectures, do those kind of things. That makes it much less stressful once you come to the exam period. So, in my undergrad in Europe, it was basically, we only had exams at the end of the year. There was no midterm. The homework didn't count for anything. It was just for you to learn, right? And that's also the philosophy I take in my classes, that, really what you want to develop here is a way to be able to learn something new, right? That's in university. That's one of the things you should learn. You should learn how to learn, right? That's a key thing. So the actionable advice on that is stay on top of your studies. Don't stress. Don't, blow it off completely throughout the semester and then cram for your final. You'll not do well, but also it actually creates a lot of stress. But rather try to lead a more balanced life where you study and then you do other things, or whether you have a job or do research or do extracurriculars, meet people. Those are also important parts.
Okay, we have a question from the chat. How has COVID impacted your workflow as a professor or researcher? And are there any changes to your teaching style or research that you'll continue to implement after?
Okay, I guess I can go first. Well, I mean, for us, COVID, obviously, I mean, it's the same for everyone now. You're stuck at home. You don't go outside. You don't see other people, right? That's the everyone has to deal with that, right? But as a professor, a lot of the work you do on a computer, anyways, right? So a lot of things like preparing your classes or writing things up for your research, things like that, you do on a computer anyways. You can do it at home, you can do it in your office. It doesn't really matter. What you have to do is make sure you sort of create a space where you don't get interrupted and you can work, right? And whatever that is for you, that works for you. In terms of our research, my research is lab-based, right? So we actually go in the lab and we make transistors, for example. Like my grad students go in the lab and actually make transistors, right? And unfortunately, as a professor, you don't get to do that anymore, really. You have to manage that whole, you have to get the money for the research and things like that. But my students are in the lab, and so it's been difficult for them because, the labs were closed for a few months, and now there are a lot of restrictions on that. But in terms of teaching, I would say it's actually not changed as much as I thought it would. Because last semester I didn't teach a very huge class where maybe it's harder to interact with students. If you have a few hundred students, it's harder. The class I taught were like 30, 40 students. So I still tried to teach them how I teach them before, which is basically, give a lecture, but give a lot of opportunities for students to ask questions, me asking questions to students, and sort of make it interactive. And, it's not quite the same as in a lecture hall, but you can kind of simulate it in Zoom. So, so I did that. I did one class like that where I just did normal lectures on a whiteboard on my screen, and it worked fairly well. I did that in 3610. And then another class I pre-recorded videos, and then once a week we met and had, I had some examples in the videos, which then we went through in the live session, basically. So that's another way some professors will do their classes now. And, those live sessions were also very interactive. The students asked me questions, I asked them questions. And so in the end of the day, I think it's important to have that interaction. That's why you take classes with us, right? Why you don't just watch a YouTube video or something, to have that interaction and have examples and exams as well. That's another part. So I would say in terms of my teaching style, it actually hasn't changed that much. Some operational things, how you run exams and things like that. Like, for example, previously I had a final and a midterm exam. And now what I did was I had a test every week in the second half of the semester. Because that, then there's less pressure for cheating. There's less, if your internet doesn't work, I didn't count every single of those tests. So some students commented that they actually really like that and want me to continue doing that, because that was the second part of your question. What will I keep? And I think for the students, it's good because it keeps them sort of working every week, and you have a test, and it sort of gives you continuity. But as I said in my previous answer, I actually think it's good for you to learn to work towards something like a final exam and not have a test every week that forces you to study, but rather you study of your own accord. So I'll decide if I'm going to keep that or not. But yeah, I guess that's the overview of how things have changed. Yeah.
Professor Pingwan, did you?
Okay, so yeah, I will make it very brief. So to me, I agree with Gerd. Yeah, I thought this pandemic would impact my research and teaching a lot at the beginning when we, stayed at home at the beginning in March last year. But actually, the impact it's not that much, as Gerd said. In my research, because most of my research is based on computer simulation, actually not impact much. And I have the regular meeting, weekly meeting with my my students, with my master and PhD students through Zoom. I found it very effective. It's almost the same as what we meet in person. So I feel maybe in the future, so this is the most effective way that we can work together, because it saved me a lot of time. Previously I take every day I take 2 hours, 1 hour from home to the university, and another hour, at least 1 hour, sometimes 1 hour and a half on the way. Now I save a lot of time. So to me, it's I think it's positively. It doesn't change my research much, but also it saved me a lot of time on the transportation. In terms of teaching and this pandemic, because all the things go online, it also gave me a chance to, to learn how to use Xpen to write those equations on the computer, which I never done before. And I found it very, very, very interesting, very useful. And also, it's very good for students, because previously I wrote all those those equations, those formulas on the whiteboard. Although at that time, I also make my lecture to be recorded, so that students they can review all the recorded lecture after the class in case they miss any class. But those recorded lecture can only record all the what I wrote on the computer. Basically, they can only record the slides and my voice. But what I wrote on the whiteboard, they cannot record it. So it makes inconvenience for some students who miss any course. Well, now it's good for everyone, because everyone is everything is recorded. I use my Xpen to write on the computer, and it's as easy as I wrote on the whiteboard. So I feel this is maybe a trend in the future. So I feel the students may like this kind of, I don't know. For me, I think it's better than the case that I do, in person. But the only difficulty is for the exam. So it's a challenging, like, to manage 100 students attending. It can prevent them from any possible cheating. So this may be a challenging issue. Apart from that, I think in terms of teaching, I like this online teaching. I think most of students also like it. This is my opinion.
Yeah, and like with that in mind, I would also like to just remind everyone that, yeah, the online stuff can be kind of tough, especially for maybe a hardware engineering class. But just remember, commuting to a school at like York or University of Toronto, which is majority commuter school, very few res students, at these schools, it does take a big toll on your body, and it takes a lot of time. It's not just the time you're, commuting. It takes a big toll on you standing on a subway that's crowded, holding up a bag. So always remember that when you go back, you might miss this, and you might think that this was still better. Aside from the hardware classes, you want to do the hardware classes in person, I believe. I think from here we will end the recording and just leave the floor open for audience questions.
I'll just ask.
We have one more question. Sorry about that.
So for the professors, given the current state of the job market right now and how this pandemic has affected the job market, and even before that, what are some of your advices for students that want to stand out, that are taking your courses or that are your graduate students, or things you've seen from the students you've taught in the past or experienced yourself?
Maybe I go first for this question. What type of job you want? Like if you find a communication, telecom communication related job, so taking those my course like communication related course is very important. So first of all, you should have a target. So what type of company you want to look for after graduation? When you choose the elective at your higher, even you are at the third year or first year, you may have some preference. You choose the course which can help you to find relevant job at that companies. Another important thing, I think, is not just GPA. I think the company, they also look for a person which has, they have the confidence that you have some experience, or you can work well with others, unless you got some experience. So it's very essential to take some intern. So you should try your best to find some co-op opportunity to take some intern to get a good reference from your intern company. So that's also important. Another opportunity is if it's difficult to find an intern, or you cannot find a good opportunity. Another chance is you can do some research work. You can, like at the second year or third year, you can look at some professors' website and find out which professors' research falls in your interest, and you can contact to those professors and to look for whether there is opportunity to work in their labs to gain some research experience with them, so that when you try to find a job, you can get a good reference from that professor, give you very strong support. So this is also will be helpful for you to find a good job. Yeah, so that's my case.
Okay. Yeah, I totally agree that at some point it comes down to what you want to do, right? And if you know what you want to do, that makes it much easier, because then you can target your activities towards it. But I also agree that GPA is one thing, and the better your GPA, obviously that helps, right? But then the difference, in academia, GPA, like if you want to do master's, PhD, GPA is maybe a little more important than if you want to go into industry, for example. But also experience. So absolutely, internships, co-op maybe are very important, or research. I wouldn't say to do research if you can't find an internship. I would say if you want to do research, then do some research with a professor, and that is really important. Let's say you want to do a job where you need a master's or a PhD for it, right? Then those degrees are research based. So if you have some research in undergrad and maybe go to a conference or get a paper or something and get a good reference from a professor, then that sets you up to get a good graduate degree. But if you want to go into industry, then the research can also help, but doing an internship in a company probably helps more, getting a reference from them. Or the ideal case is you go to a company, you like them, they like you, it's your last summer maybe before you graduate, and when you graduate, they hire you back and you start your job there, right? That's maybe the ideal case. So these internships can do that. They can basically give you experience, they can help you achieve things, but you can also see them as sort of a test case, right? So you do an internship in a company one summer, and then you decide, well, I liked it, or maybe you decide, no, I didn't like it. I don't want to work for that company or that industry. Or you do research, and maybe you decide you don't want to do research, or maybe you do, right? So you can see these internships also sort of a low stakes way of exploring things, right? Because as an engineer, there's a lot of things you can do, right? You can work in industry and manufacturing, but a lot of engineers also work in sort of between the management and the technical side, like technical sales, right? Or some people work in intellectual property, like patent law. Maybe you need a graduate degree for that, depends. But that's another avenue for engineers. Research, of course, but research again can mean a lot of different things. It can mean working in a university as a professor. It can mean working in a government research lab. It can mean working in a research lab of a company. It can mean doing research and development, right? So there's a whole big breadth of things you can do with a degree in engineering, electrical engineering, and you need to figure out what you want to do, and then get that relevant experience. And I guess one more thing where you can get experience also is there's student clubs. I think here we have do we have a nano satellite club or a solar car?
We do. We have nanosatellite. We have Mars rover, and
Yep.
we also have a rocket society as well.
Yep. So those are also good ways to get experience, meet people. Another option that people can do is they can create a startup after their undergrad or maybe grad degree, right? Which can come from a project you did at university, maybe from your capstone. So you have all these options, and you need to think about, first of all, explore different options to decide what you want to do, and then sort of think strategically what will get you into those, right? And if you have specific questions about how to get into a certain thing, then we can talk about that. But that's sort of the general idea. And maybe if you're in the first year, it's a little early to know what you want to do, but now you should start exploring.
Okay.
We'll open up the. Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, we'll open up the floor now, but before that, I do have actually another question in the chat. You've recruited plenty of research students before, however, not everyone maybe was a good fit. What are the qualities that top research assistants exhibit and you look for when recruiting students to help you? And just ask to be mindful of the time that we're very close to 2.
Okay, I guess maybe I can go first this time. So quickly, yeah, for a research assistant, I mean, the most important thing is that you produce good research results, right? Which comes down to learning new things, because most of the time when you start doing research, you don't know that much about that particular area, especially as an undergrad researcher. So being able to learn fast is important, and then also being diligent about things and actually putting in the effort, right? That's very important, especially if you do research throughout the year in addition to your undergrad degree. It's very easy to sort of, your midterms pile up, you forget about your research, and then nothing happens for some time, right? So again, staying on things continuously, that's how you make progress. In small steps every week, ultimately you have completed something. So that's important. And then other sort of transferable skills, which are good to have, but you also learn through research is, for example, how to write things, how to present things. You get those kind of skills, for example, by going to a conference, right? And then they look really good on your CV, and they're transferable to any kind of career. So that's short answer.
Yeah, for me, I think the self-motivation is very important. I like the students, working as a research assistant, so like PhD student or master student. First of all, they should have the self-motivation. In that way, so they can work diligently. We don't have to push a lot. They know they have the passion for their work, for their research. And if they don't know, they can learn very fast. So this is, I think it's very essential.
Okay, so I'll stop the recording there, and we'll leave the rest of the time open for just your questions that you may have. Just unmute your mic and ask, or type them in the chat. For our 2 guest speakers here today, if you have to leave at any point, it's okay. We totally understand. Everybody has a very, very busy schedule. But everyone else, thank you very much for coming. And at 2 p.m., the MEC department has their session right after. So if you can make it, please come. If not, it will also be recorded. Thank you.